Welcome to the Golden Age of Cardboard podcast, where we remember a time when stacks of cards were held together with rubber bands and Mickey Mantles were put in bike spokes. We hope you will enjoy and reminisce as you come along with us as we tell stories about the baseball cards from the Golden Age of Baseball. We will examine the state of the vintage baseball card market and talk to some of the greatest collectors in the hobby. You won't be hearing us talk about any chrome or shiny cards here. Now, to take you on this retrospective journey, here's your host, direct from the shallow end of the gene pool, my son, Mike Moynihan.
Yo, and hello everybody out there, and welcome to another episode of the Golden Age of Cardboard podcast. I am your host, Mike Moynihan, longtime collector, longtime vintage lover, but I really love the hobby just in general. And tonight's going to be a great topic because if you've been in the hobby a long time, or if you've only been in the hobby a short time, it's highly likely that this topic is going to resonate with you. And that's because all of us, no matter if we have what we consider to be a small collection, a giant collection, Hall of Famers, no-namers from your favorite team, it doesn't matter. We have all been influenced by something. We've all been inspired by stuff. We've all live in a world today where the impact of social media is greater than ever in the hobby. And so that's a topic that we're going to cover a lot of different bases with this. And there's so much to cover that I wanted to bring a guest on who I've been remiss to not have on this show. And I'm going to give him a hard time here in a second, mainly self-directed hard time. And that is Alex Bowman53. How you doing, man? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing great, man. I'm so glad to be here. So I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, we've talked about this for a couple of months now. And I remember I did an episode talking about the differences between 53 Bowman and 53 Topps. And I cannot tell you how many messages I got privately, like, what are you doing not having Alex on that show? And I thought, yeah, that probably would have been a really smart idea, given that your YouTube username is Bowman53. For those out there that are listening to the podcast and may not know you, Alex, maybe give them an insight into why your name is Bowman53 on YouTube and what kind of stuff you like to collect, that whole story.
For sure. So first off, Mike, it's probably a good thing you didn't have me on that because it would have been lopsided. I don't think the Topps person would have gotten a chance to speak. So I've been collecting for, 4 years now, so really not that long. I collected as a kid, took time off as most people do. And when I got back into the hobby, I did something that I didn't think was crazy, but in retrospect, it definitely was, which was that I only collected the 1953 Bowman set. And that was my entire focus for, 2 years. And in that time, I don't really think I picked anything else up, which is definitely crazy. But I really had a lot of fun building it. And initially, when I started my YouTube channel, it was just to kind of keep track of what I got. And then by the end of finishing that set, I discovered this whole community thing. So since then, I've been building my own kind of personal set, I guess you could call it. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just like cards that I react to, cards that I like. It's primarily vintage, pre-war. But right now I'm spending a lot of time in the 1950s. I can't get out of the 1950s for some reason. Maybe because the cards are awesome, right? But so that's my hobby history.
Yeah, that's a good reason to stay in the 50s because they're awesome cards for sure.
Best cards ever, yeah.
I reached out on my YouTube channel to try to get people to give me some ideas for future shows because, oh, by the way, you're on the 1-year anniversary show. You don't know that. You didn't know that, but I've been doing this podcast now for a year, and it's amazing to see how much it's resonated with people, how much people have really loved the vintage genre or niche or whatever you want to call it has been largely ignored in the last couple of years of the hobby boom, because, card prices of moderns have gone up so much, and there's just this gravitation towards new and shiny.
Sure.
But yet I'm finding this giant audience for people that want to hear about old and crusty, kind of thing. And
Yeah.
it's kind of like me, old and crusty. And
that's where we come in. Yeah.
That's right. But so welcome to the 1-year anniversary show.
Hey, honored to be here. Yeah.
Not that it's anything special other than just another episode talking to a fellow collector about our love for this great hobby. And you actually, as I was soliciting advice for future shows, I got some great ideas from a lot of different people. And I thought, I need to talk to Alex. Because we've, again, talked about doing a show. And I texted you this just to give people insight to how this stuff happens. Hey, I texted Alex. Hey, what do you want to talk about? I don't know. What do you want to talk about? And it's like, well, we'll come up with something. And that's really how I run my show, is just very ad hoc, ad lib, off the cuff. But you had a great idea, which is the things I talked about in the intro. Let's talk first about social media and how it has transformed this hobby. Maybe talking from your perspective, how you've seen it transform the hobby, and positives and negatives from that, maybe.
Sure. Well, my personal experience with it, maybe that will shed some light on it, was when I decided to get into card collecting, I was not thinking about social media, honestly, at all. I was kind of dipping my toe in the water, learning about cards. And I had an old friend from college that I knew collected cards, because it had kind of come up in conversations here and there. And I reached out to him thinking like, oh, I can kind of get some tips from him, because he's been doing this for a while. Well, it turned out that when I did, he had stopped collecting, and I can't remember what it was. He just kind of burned out from it. So I was like, all right, well, that's not going to work out. So I kind of hit a dead end there. And then I think maybe just out of desperation, I started typing stuff in on YouTube, just like on a whim. I mean, we all know what you can find on YouTube, but when you don't know about this community, it feels like a leap of faith. And when I did that, I was blown away by the fact that there was a response. Like, there's just this like endless feed of like people making videos about cards, whether it was like showing cards or talking about, the history of the cards or whatever else. I couldn't believe it. And then that was it. I mean, I just got hooked. And of course, that's the tip of the iceberg, because there's Instagram, there's Facebook groups, there's all sorts of different avenues, and they all have different aspects to it. Like, Instagram is all about looking and just, it's pretty instantaneous, and it's just about, look at the card. YouTube, I think there's more about not just the card, but the person behind the card, I guess you could say. And Facebook is that, but it's more, I think Facebook is more like sharing opportunities, like buying and selling, or just community conversations and stuff like that. But they all have, different aspects to them, but they're all about connecting people. And to me, that's what's so cool, is if I never went on YouTube and just typed in, baseball cards, there's a good chance that my hobby life would have been like a couple of weeks. Like, I think it would have been like, okay, cool, I got some really cool cards, and nobody in my immediate life really cares about cards, so I've got nobody to talk to about it, and that's kind of boring. So I feel like all the social media keeps our fandom, keeps our hobby love alive, because other people get how we feel about it. Other people get, how excited we are.
Yeah, that's such, I think, a common thing about the hobby. In your story, discovering an outlet to be able to find community, and it makes the hobby so much richer. Yeah. And I don't think people understand that aren't a part of a community like that, whether it's, again, Facebook or YouTube or Instagram or whatever. This hobby can be incredibly solitary.
Yeah.
Right. If left to its own devices, and again, unless you have a lot of friends that you happen to grow up with, and I don't hear stories about that very much, of guys that, hey, there were a bunch of kids and we all collected as kids and now we all collect as adults. That's not true. I had a buddy in high school that I collected Daryl Strawberry. He collected Ricky Henderson. And although I still am friends with him and talk to him here, 40 years later, we don't talk about cards really ever. And he still has all his Ricky Hendersons, I think. But I used to go to shows with him and stuff like that. Those relationships kind of evolve and usually fizzle out from a card perspective. And you end up, if you stay collecting or discover collecting as a hobby, where do you go to talk to other people about it? Because it's so not fun to have everything just sit in a dark hole. And so for me, my first venture into the social media world, I guess at all, was really on forums. I was a part of Freedom Cardboard, which I think it still exists, actually. I haven't been on there in forever. But FCB was what we called it, Freedom Cardboard, and it was a cardboard forum. Then I got introduced to the blowout forums, and I was on there for a long time. Still am on there. But what's funny is I have really gravitated away from those type of written forums because there's no personality to it. There's no depth is probably the right way to put it. It just feels very superficial, and people can go on there and you can be anybody you want and just be this ogre, or you can be super nice, or you can be whatever. It feels very impersonal. Do you agree with it? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, my forum experience is definitely different from you, but I've been in other forums like Net54, and to me,
Net54, for sure.
Yeah. Like I like that forum, but I really kind of feel like that, to me, that forum is like a place that I go to do research or to like get advice or whatever. But I agree. Like I don't go in those forums looking to connect with people. I feel like it's probably difficult, not impossible, but like, to me, what I love about YouTube is like, yeah, there's information, there's knowledge, but also there's just people that I can get along with and have a good time with. And I didn't know that I was looking for that when I started, but as it turns out, it's like, that's actually what I love about it the most. Like the cards are cool, but what I'm so surprised by is it's also about the people.
Yeah, it's funny how that comes up probably every other episode that I do, if not every episode, certainly on the podcast, because I usually have guests that are friends of mine from the YouTube community. I don't, because the truth is if people ask me why that's where I concentrate all of my guests on, well, that's the people I know.
Yeah.
That's the people I'm comfortable with. And they also happen to be really great hobbyists too. They're all incredibly knowledgeable or just fun. And so it sounds like whenever I talk, especially, that I'm very YouTube centric. That's just what has had the most influence on me, is all of the people that I've met in the community. And when you say the influence that it's had on you and how much fun it is, and that's why you're in the hobby, can you tell any specific stories maybe, or just talk about some people that you've really made a great connection with, and tell some stories about how that's changed your hobby?
Sure. So when I think about when I first started watching YouTube, I definitely typed in 1953 Bowman. And if you type that in on YouTube, you're going to find Joey Brings It. And Joey's not making videos as much lately, but I loved, first of all, it's like that was my exposure to the idea that people made videos about baseball cards. And Joey is like such an upbeat guy. And so he just loves cards, and it's like, it's not an act, like that's just who he is. And he's so enthusiastic about it that like it came through to me as like, okay, I already loved this set, but the way that he would describe the cards and just how excited he was about the cards like got me so much more like amped about it. And so maybe it's partially Joey's fault that I went the direction I went in. But I love it. And every now and then I'll go back and watch some of those videos because it's like, it just reminds me of like those early days of discovering that stuff. So I mean, since then though, like, you know, gosh, there's so many channels. And you know, one channel that comes to mind too is like Ray from Philly. I know you and Ray are good friends, and Ray's been around for a long time. And you know, you pick up on that when you're new to it. Like, okay, Ray's got a lot of followers, and it's just obvious also that he's been around, he's been doing it. You look through his channel, you see all the videos. But what I loved about watching Ray's videos, from what I remember, is like Ray tends to show like one card at a time. Like he might show a handful sometimes, but usually it's like, I just got this pickup. And I liked that because it was like, I could tell he was excited about it. Like I could tell it was a card that he cared about. Maybe he was building a registry, or he had a goal or something. It's like, okay, this is, you know, one more card in my process. And, you know, he'd take the time to show the card and talk about it, and then maybe do like a reading from that Mike Payne book or whatever, and he's still doing it. I love that. Like he's got his thing, and he does it every time. And I kind of picked up on that. Like everybody's got their way of doing it. And, you know, so it kind of like makes you feel like, okay, well, I want to find a routine. I want to find a rhythm to collecting too. And the weird thing is, like, you have a rhythm to collecting, but then you also have a rhythm to like how you make videos. And somehow it becomes part of the collecting habit. It becomes part of the hobby. Like to me, like YouTube and collecting is like, it's like this, like there's no difference between it.
Yeah. You're right. Ray and I are good friends, and we connected initially on the Mike Payne set, you know, the 300 grade card. I saw him doing videos about it, and I'm like, man, I'm doing that set too.
Right.
You know, it's weird how he might say that I've influenced him, and I'll say that he influenced me, which is actually kind of the cool part about it, right? It's not like it has to be someone's better or worse than the other. It's more, dude, I saw you pick that up and I loved it, and I went vice versa. And it is never ending for me in terms of the influence that YouTube constantly brings to my collection. Right. Cards I might never have thought about before. I see somebody show it, and they're enthusiastic about it and passionate, and I go, oh my gosh, I've got to I get it. Eureka moment of holy crap, I get it. I get why they love it so much. I'm on the hunt right now for a Stan Musial 1955 Rawlings card.
Yes.
Mangini's talking about them all the time.
Same. I'm guilty as well. The same
it's killing me. I love it, and they're super rare, so I'll be hunting for a long time. But I know when I see one, if I see one, it'll evoke that memory that, oh my gosh, that's the thing John was talking about. Yeah. I loved it, and I thought it was really cool too. And he already has them, so I'm kind of there's also a little bit of jealousy, right? Because I'm like, dang, he's already got it. I gotta go find it. But the hunt's the fun part anyway. So I wish I could think, because I've been watching YouTube for 12, 13 years, I would guess. Back when it was like old school guys, like big time old school guys. And I never even considered being a part of the community, that because I didn't know it existed. I was merely a lurker, observer, watcher for several years. I mean, there's a reason my YouTube channel is called Baseball Collector, because I got in so long ago that name wasn't taken yet. What is that like? Right. If you can just call yourself something simple like Baseball Collector and that not be a name that's already been used, it was, I wish I could remember I remember the types of videos that I liked watching guys do tours of their room.
Sure.
And how they displayed things. I find incredible fascination with that and inspiration from that, quite frankly. Yeah. My desk that I have that's covered in cards with the glass over it I saw that on somebody else's channel. Right. The beast behind me, I had this idea, and then I saw some comic book collectors, actually, not even sports card guys, that had cabinets like that. Yeah. And I was like, man, I could do that for cards. How cool would that be?
That reminds me of, like, I don't remember the timeline, but I definitely remember whether I watched it when you did it or if I went back and watched it when you were building that. That always kind of stuck in my head. And then, like, what was it, like 2 years ago, I had made like my own mini tiny beast. It's like nowhere near what you've got, but like something for my set. And I was like, what stuck in my head was, that's awesome that Mike did that. But what I really liked was that it's like, okay, it's cool to have the cards, but it's like, I want to have a great place for the cards to live, so to speak. And I always had it in the back of my mind. And that came from you, definitely.
Yeah. And I've seen many people, and create their own version of the beast.
Yeah.
And I love how people put their own spin on it and make it their own and make it fit their collection. Like that's the greatest part of inspiration. Inspiration isn't supposed to be necessarily replication and duplication. It's supposed to be inspiration to something better, to something more unique or different. And like, this isn't the greatest card case in the world, but it is the greatest card case in the world for me.
Sure.
Does that make sense? Like, I just need 2 more of them and I'll be set. But it's this, and then different guys, I would name a few, but I'd be remiss because I'd miss a couple that I know have built their own cool things. I just think of Jake, the Ticket Leprechaun.
Yeah, sure.
His big unit, and Garrett, my good friend, built what he calls the monster. So it already names their case something grandiose and scary sometimes, but that's so flattering, because not because they might not have come up with that idea on their own, but it gives them that jolt. It gives them that, hey, I can go do that. If dumb Mike can go do that, well, certainly I can. I just have my dad that was the genius behind that. Believe me, that's all my dad. But yeah, I've been influenced so much over that, and I don't get influenced by Instagram as much, although I can't say I'm a huge Instagram guy. But I bet there's a lot of guys out there that they're scrolling through their Instagram feed and seeing cool cards that they've never seen before. Would certainly, I would think that would be a source of inspiration. Do you?
Yeah. You know what? There are YouTubers that have Instagram channels that I follow just because I know the guy. And they'll have different spins on it. Like, Scotty Tradition has a good Instagram.
He does.
Brent Nearmint Musings does a really good job of, like, his Instagram feels really different from his YouTube channel. Like he does stuff on his Instagram that's not exactly what he does on YouTube. And I'm sure there's a ton of people out there that I'm not even following that are doing cool things. And I mean, it's the same thing. It's like, there's something tactile, there's something visual about baseball cards that people like. It's like, okay, maybe I've seen that card 100 times, but I've never seen your copy of it. And I've also never seen your excitement for it, or the fact that you just got it, or whatever your story is. Maybe you like finished a set or whatever. And to me, that's actually what I respond to more than the card now. Like, at first it was the card that I was excited about, and I still am, but like, I'm way more excited about like your enthusiasm as a YouTuber or an Instagrammer or whatever. That's what kind of gets me excited as a viewer.
Yeah. And you get to the point where you're so ingrained in the people that you follow on whatever social media platform it is. I get more excited most of times when I see other people get something they've been on the hunt for a really long time than I do for myself. I remember when you finished your 53 Bowman set by, of course, finishing it with the most beautiful baseball card of all time, the 53 Bowman Pee Wee Reese. I was so excited for you and enjoyed it with you. Probably not as much as you enjoyed it, but believe me, we were all out there rooting for you, Alex, and super happy that you finished it. And I'm sure you got a lot of comments and kudos and things like that, which again only affirms A, what the community can be and the depth that it can bring, and B, wow, I was doing something that people actually liked. I mean,
right.
That's cool, right? Yeah.
If I had built that set by myself without YouTube, it would be like, okay, cool, I finished it, and then I would have gone, made a cup of coffee and moved on with my day. Like, when I made that video, like, it was emotional, like, as silly as it sounds. Like, it's like, wow, I finished it. It was this whole experience. And I was thinking about it as I made the video. It's like, okay, when I started this, I hardly knew anything about baseball cards compared to what I know now, I didn't really know anything about grading. I certainly didn't know about the YouTube community. When I finished that set, it's like, wow, I've got all these friends that I've made, and I've got this really cool set that I spent a lot of time building. I know way more about 50s baseball than I ever did before. It was a whole experience that I'll never forget, never be able to replicate. So yeah, and that's, to me, that's like YouTube in general is a place that allows you to do something like that.
No doubt. And it offers an opportunity to put faces with names, to put faces with voices, to put personalities with the cards. It's because it's way more. We've, again, saying this ad nauseum, but it's way more than that. When you were a kid, or maybe even as an adult, there's more mediums than just social media that can influence us. You and I talking pre-show about, reading and learning and just looking at books or web pages or whatever. What are some other things that have influenced your hobby?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I kind of picked up on was, when I was kind of getting my feet in the hobby and dipping my toe in the water, I'd get a sense for different people's styles of collecting, and I would pick up on these cards, and that would take me to the internet, and I'd start to like learn more about the years. Like, it's weird now that, if you say like, 1954 tops, I can picture the design, but 3 or 4 years ago, it'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about. So at a certain point, it's like, okay, I got a feel for the hobby. I got a feel for the different styles and the eras and stuff. But one thing that kind of frustrated me was I really wanted a place where I could kind of see everything. If I go on eBay and type stuff in, I'll come across what I come across. But I wanted a place where I could see more of everything. And so one of the books that I got, and I'll show it, it's a huge book, so this is going to be really awkward to hold up, but it's this book, Classic Baseball Cards from 1886 to 1956. And it's not like 100% comprehensive, but I would say it's pretty darn close. It's like everything from tops, everything from Bowman and pre-war and so on. And it's amazing because you literally can just flip through decades and decades worth of baseball cards. And for me, that was so valuable because it's like, okay, I like the big cards, like the Hall of Famers and stuff, but I also like common cards. And so this gave me a way of like just kind of sitting down, actually just a couple days ago, flip through it again and just kind of take my time, enjoy it. And like, one, I can enjoy all the cards, but I can also kind of, it's almost like, window shopping. Like I was like, oh, I kind of overlooked that card last time. Maybe I should think about that card. So that for me is like a huge resource.
Yeah, it's almost like the first non-fungible token, NFT, before there were NFTs, because you can't, it's not a card, right? It's not a digital version. It's a 3D version of the card, but it's not the real card, but it can provide some inspiration as well. Yeah. I used to look at baseball books as a kid all the time. And I had each team used to have these little surf like team books, and they'd have each team set from every year in them that Topps put out. They were incredibly cheap and given out at ballparks and stuff like that. I wish I could find all of mine now. I have them somewhere in this house. I just don't know where they are.
We'll make a great video, Mike. You searching for those in your house.
That would be great. Looking through the attic. But when I was a kid, I think to become a real fan of vintage, like to be a fan today of vintage, you have to be a fan of baseball, I think.
Yeah. I agree.
If you are in it for the money, good for you. But I think that's a terrible motivator because money always tends to disappoint. But if I loved the game as a kid, and I loved reading about the history. And I've talked about this, but I've got it out. I pulled it out for you. That sounded.
Yeah, for the podcast viewers, let's explain that.
I pulled out the book, the Baseball Encyclopedia, which is this giant, it's massive. I don't even know. It could be used as a doorstop for a vault door, Yeah. And I have the 9th edition here. I had a couple of earlier editions, They are up in my attic. I only keep the newest one, which is 1993, by the way. So it's, what is that, 30 years?
Yeah.
Long time ago. But I used to just read this, Alex, and it's got every player that ever played. It's got their career stats, and it's just a name with their statistics, but it's got all the record holders and the different World Series and the All-Star games and the top 100 home run guys at the time. Which I wonder how fast I can find that.
There you go.
It's changed, but I literally used to just like single season batting leaders, Hugh Duffy, and I'd be like, who the heck is Hugh Duffy?
Right.
I mean, he hit 438 in 1894, and
he's got to have a baseball card, though, right? So
right, and I want to know, who all these people were. Jack Chesbrough and Amos Rusty. All these are Hall of Famers, by the way. They just happen to be. But lifetime, I'd go through who had the highest lifetime batting averages, and where's home runs here? I'm trying. Hank Aaron, of course, 755. And I'd memorize these numbers. They meant something. They were iconic. 755 meant Hank Aaron's home run total. 714 was Babe Ruth. 660 was Mace. Like, I could tell you all the guys. Back then, to be in the top 10, you only had to have 521 home runs. And I thought it was always interesting that Ted Williams and Willie McCovey each hit 521 home runs. And then Eddie Matthews and Ernie Banks both hit 512. I thought that was, I don't know, just interesting. Just those kinds of weird things.
Yeah.
And this was way pre-eBay and all of that stuff. So finding cards was not like I could just get on eBay and look for any card that I want.
Yeah.
It was going to a show or going to the shop. And I could certainly never afford like a Lou Gehrig card or Ruth or any of those guys. Even Aaron and Mays were out of my price range as a kid. But as I got older, discretionary income increased and I started to buy these cards. And then I see other stuff I get involved in YouTube. It's like this tangled web of craziness that allows the hobby to expand beyond I would have ever been able to tell you.
Right. And you can trace it all the way back to that encyclopedia.
I can't, just loving it. Have you read this book here called The Bubblegum Card War?
Yes, I have. Yes.
I love this. This is done by Dean Hanley, who's Dean's Cards on eBay. So most all of us have bought cards from Dean's Cards before, or at least seen them and said, that's overpriced, I'm not buying that. But an amazing collection. He runs an amazing business. He wrote this wonderful book called the Bubblegum Card War about the Topps and Bowman rivalry from in the late 40s, early 50s. It's fascinating, by the way. Do you recommend the book?
Totally. And I feel like that's one of my favorite parts of the hobby too, which is, and I don't want to get us off track, but man, the Bowman Topps thing, I feel like I think there's probably even more to that story than people even know. And I think fascinating. And we'll see here, I guess, in a few years, what's going to happen with Topps and so on. But yeah, that rivalry was pretty awesome because we all benefited from it. We had amazing cards in the 50s.
Yeah. And there were two choices of great cards.
Yeah.
Then you had the solo Topps years from 56 through 80, essentially. And then it got out of control, right? With all like the competition's good, but I think too much competition is too much of a good thing, kind of thing. Right. But in speaking about again, as we talk about how great the community has been to us and how much we love it and all these different things, what I want people to understand, and I'm worried about, if you're new to the hobby or new to getting back into the hobby, what would you tell people if they're feeling intimidated or it's an old boys club, they already all know each other, I can't make any relationships within that. It's already this close-knit group and I'm an outsider looking in. What would you tell those people?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, if you jump in, what you'll discover, and what we've been saying so far is true. I think you'll find it to be true, which is it's going to make collecting baseball cards this whole other experience that you can't even really imagine until you experience it yourself. So, if you're collecting baseball cards, chances are, and you're listening to this, you're probably doing it, and it's kind of a solitary thing. Maybe somebody who also collects cards. If you do, you're pretty lucky. But most of us have friends and family that look at us like we're crazy. Like, why are you collecting these old pieces of cardboard? And at most, they can be like, "Oh, I'm happy that you're happy," but they're not really interested, and they don't really want to talk about it. So it's kind of like this unfulfilling experience to be like, get the card, be like, "Oh, this is awesome," and I've got nobody to talk about with it. And it's weird how like this hobby, I feel like you need people to interact with for this hobby to really be truly like fully enjoyable. I mean, you can still get a card and be excited about it, and enjoy it, but getting to talk about it with other people is so much more fun, in my opinion. So that should be your motivator. And then the other thing I would say is, when I started, I didn't know anybody, and I definitely was apprehensive about getting myself out there and talking and putting myself on camera and all that kind of stuff. And like, honestly, like me, however long ago it was, 4 years ago, the idea that I'm on camera right now, I'd be like, what are you doing? Like, I couldn't imagine doing this. But the truth is, everybody's welcoming. Everybody, like, I feel like as a group, it's always kind of turning over. Like, some people are kind of taking a break from it. New people are coming in, but I feel like we're always welcoming. I was welcomed. I try to go out of my way to welcome new people. And it's because we all know that what's at the heart of it is that everybody's looking to enjoy the hobby with each other, and everybody's looking for an outlet and an opportunity to connect. And the initial connection is, oh, you like that set, I like that set too. Or your favorite player is Roberto Clemente, that's my favorite player too, or whatever it is. And then from that, all sorts of other stuff happens that you didn't anticipate, which is basically you make a bunch of new friends. And like, the other thing I'd say is, like, I would imagine most people would agree is, like, the older that you get, the harder it is to make new friends. And to me, that's like not the case in YouTube. It's really easy to make friends in YouTube through this community, which is awesome. So that to me is a good enough reason to try it.
Yeah. What you said is exactly true. I think for new people that are, again, either just they've been on the outside looking in, and they may enjoy a lot of people's content, either whether it's podcasts or YouTube or watching them on Instagram or whatever. But the minute you can make a connect, I think it starts with what you said, which is, hey, that's my same favorite player, or that's my same favorite set, or I have that same card and I love it too. Those are ways to, how do I say this? Get your foot in the door. That doesn't sound very, to break bread with somebody and to break the ice, and just try it. Just reach out to somebody that's out there, whether it's on a forum or whatever. Try to go beyond the superficial. Try to go beyond that. And I mean, the truth is the truth. I mean, I literally talk, and you probably the same way. I talk to 4 or 5 hobby people every day, literally every day, whether it's via text or Instagram direct. I get a lot of direct messages from Instagram because people follow me on the podcast, send me messages on my Instagram, which is, oh, by the way, at Baseball Collector Mike. If you want to be one of those people that I'm the first guy you want to reach out to, feel free. And they tell me their story, they'll type it out or whatever, because not everybody's on YouTube, and that's listening to this, and that's fine. There's a lot of ways to make the hobby richer for you. And if you're not involved, I think you're missing out. I really do.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, like, part of the fun for me initially, and still to this day, is, you can connect over common interests, but it's also like, dude, what you do is not what I do necessarily, but I really appreciate and respect the way you collect or whatever. And also, like, you can connect with people in ways where, like, it makes the hobby more fun fun in the sense that you can, and I know you do this, I do this, I think most of us do, like reaching out for advice, like, hey guys, what do you think about this? Is this a good deal? Or does this card look good to you? Or, what do you think? And you can kind of like pull on this huge resource of people that, some of us have been doing this our whole lives, or some of us are like an absolute expert in this era or whatever. And you can just pull on that information. And one, it gives you peace of mind, but also it's like, it's part of the fun. It's like, I've got this community that like has my back if I need help, or it's just a way to interact with people that I think like you don't have if you're just doing this on your own.
Yeah. A funny story, about a year and a half ago when I was talking with Ty and Jeff Hofer, who's Pack Geek, and the three of us were coming up with this idea of Bench Clear Media and what it could look like, this conglomeration of YouTube channels and podcasts. And Ty was a podcaster primarily, and he knew hobby people, but they weren't like his friend. I mean, they were friendly.
Sure.
I don't know that he'd be, calling them for life advice or anything. And so he knew them on a business level. And Jeff and I tried to tell him, like, dude, you don't understand, this YouTube community deal is for real. Like, you just wait. Like, he's like, oh, that doesn't really, it's like he thought it was a unicorn or something, like this doesn't exist. And so we start doing this Bench Clear Media thing where we're putting out YouTube videos and channels. And I started the podcast. He was already doing his podcast, bringing in all these people. And then we did Hobby Palooza for the first time last year. And he's like, there's no way. Like, when the idea first came to me, he was like, how are you going to fill up that much time? Because we did it for 3 days, I think, last year, the first year. He's like, how are you going to do that? I had the slots filled in like a day and a half. Like, and that was only because certain guys couldn't call me back. I mean, it was so easy.
Yeah.
It's like, that network is unbelievable. Now it's taken, it doesn't happen overnight. I want to tell people that might be looking to do this. Like, this isn't going to be like, you just open the floodgates and you're going to have so many friends, you're going to have to turn your phone off at night kind of thing. It does take time. Like any good friendship, any good relationship takes time to cultivate. You can't just expect it to be this amazing experience initially, but I promise you, if you put in the time, if you put in the effort, just like like any other relationship, if you do that, and you're going to get told no every once in a while. Sometimes the pretty girl doesn't say yes to a dance, and so that's okay too. That doesn't mean you don't ask the next girl to take a dance. And so try to just stick with it. If there's so much time in the day, I can't spend 24/7 talking to hobby as much as I'd love to. I've got a life, I've got kids and wives and work and other hobbies and a ranch and all kinds, right? There's stuff tugging at us all the time.
Sure.
But I think it's one of those things that you'll get as much out of it as you're willing to put into it. And I don't think you'll be sorry.
Right. Yeah. I if there's any other advice for somebody that's thinking about this, I would say like focus on what you're talking about, which is like building relationships. It's so easy to focus on the other stuff that YouTube kind of puts in your face to focus on, which is like subscribers and views and stuff. And of course you pay attention to that and you want people to watch what you're doing, but also remember, ultimately, it's about building relationships. And if, I remember like even like more than 2 years ago, I reached a point where I was pretty happy. Like I didn't have tons of subscribers. I didn't have tons of views. But what I did have was every time I made a video, I had a good experience with, a handful of really substantial conversations that I could have in the comments. And I was having a good time. And so when I reached that point, it's like, I'm cool. Like anything beyond that for me is gravy. Like, sure, I want more views. I want more subscribers. I want all that stuff like everybody wants. But I was happy with the interactions. And if you're building good relationships, people are commenting on your videos or just making friends. You don't necessarily have to comment. Eventually people start exchanging phone numbers. You start making friends. Now you're in, you're having a good time, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah. It's incredibly important. I heard a quote. I wish I could give proper credit for this quote, but somebody said this in a video literally years ago. This is not something new, but it's a concept that's always stuck with me over the years. And as channels grow and get bigger, I think it's important not to lose sight of, I'd rather have 4 quarters than 100 pennies.
Right.
You know, if I'd rather have 4 more significant relationships in my life than 100 very superficial ones. And so the problem is quarters are bigger than pennies, and, you know, they take up a little more. It just takes a little more time. Right. And,
sure.
And again, you can't be best friends with everybody. I try to tell that to people, like, look, you can be really good friends with a certain number of people. You'll be good friends with another group. And, you know, these kind of concentric circles of relationships in our lives. The circle can be pretty big overall, you know, and
right.
It may not be, again, you'll find your core group. I guess that's what I'm trying to tell people. People call it cliquey. I think that's so bad because I interact with so many different people within the community. Mm-hmm. I don't consider, it doesn't mean that, how do I want to say this without sounding completely silly, but you're going to have just people that you just get, that's just life, right? I mean, you're just going to find people you gravitate towards. And even if they're not, quote unquote, your kind of best bud, it doesn't mean you can't really dig what they do,
right?
You know? And still be, I mean, the YouTube get together this year at the National was lots of guys that I knew well, lots of guys that I knew really well, lots of guys I hardly knew at all, but knew who they, you know, so what? It's all fine, you know?
Yeah. I mean, the other thing too is like, it's a melting pot, right? So it's like,
there you go. Yes.
You can, so like I've had this happen to me where it's like, I subscribe to a new channel. It's like, okay, cool. And I kind of watch a few of the videos, and every now and then I'll watch a video that they post, and all right, cool. I like it. You know, I don't necessarily connect with them right away, and they don't necessarily connect with me right away. And then like a year goes by and something happens, whether it's like they do a particular video or they collect something in particular, something where like something suddenly clicks. It's like, oh my gosh, you and I need to talk. And then boom, like we're off. So it's like, you never know. Like sometimes it's like instant and sometimes it takes time. But the fact that you have this environment where that could happen, that's what it's all about. So it's like you're saying, you can't like keep track of, you know, 100 channels like intensely all day long. It's just, you can't do it. But, you know, relationships will come up, and you just never know when like suddenly somebody clicks with you and you click with them. It's great.
A couple more things and then we'll wrap this up.
Yeah.
One last thing, or one thing I want to ask you and maybe have you expand on is, being that this is a vintage card podcast, the people that are going to be watching this and or listening to it probably dig vintage, right? Are there some influential channels to you that you might tell them, hey, if you love vintage too, you should go watch this person on YouTube, especially because they inspired me? Maybe say a few of those that. Oh yeah,
for sure. These are all going to be channels that I'm sure you know about. The first one that comes to mind is Nuff Said Cards. Andrew, yeah, and I know Andrew.
He's been on the show.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I'm sure he has been. And Andrew is like my, like he would like be like, oh man, don't say that. He's like my mentor. Like I love the way that guy thinks. I love the way he collects. I love his collection. Like I'm not anywhere near what he does, nor will I ever be. But when I finished the 53 set, I was trying to figure out where to go, and I remember having lots of conversations with him, and I definitely got intrigued by pre-war. I'm stuck in the 50s, as I mentioned before, but I intend to get back to pre-war, primarily because of him in a way, just the way he goes about looking for cards and his hunt and all that. Just incredible.
Well, let me say one thing quick about Andrew. I'll throw in this. I'll chime in with this. 100% you're accurate about the way he thinks and how cool that is. I call him the cardboard whisperer.
Yeah.
Because if there's a card that I'm looking for that I really, if I can only get one opinion about it, it's going to be Andrew's.
Yeah.
And I'll text him a picture and that kind of stuff. I totally agree with you. All right, next one. Go ahead.
Yeah, another guy that I really respect in terms of vintage is a channel called Think Blue 77.
Jesse.
Jesse, yeah. So he's primarily a Dodgers collector, but he's really across the board. He collects modern, he collects vintage, he collects pre-war, but I'd say he's pretty firmly set in the vintage world. And he has a really fun collection, a really fun way of approaching it. And I'm always looking for his videos. And just another guy. I mean, there's so many guys I could shout out, and I'll get in trouble for leaving them off because that's what happens. But Chuck, Northside guy. Chuck right now, he's doing 33 Gaudi. He's doing T206 like rare backs. He's doing the 53 Bowman set, which is how we originally connected. And yeah, just another guy who has a great eye, and I just respect the way he goes about collecting. Yeah.
Anybody else? I'm thinking, especially vintage, Blue Jacket 66.
Oh, yeah. Well, sure.
Actually, those back page. Eric knows a ton about vintage.
Yeah. Eric, show more vintage on your channel.
Right. We need him to do that. And
okay, here are a couple more. Don's Field of Dreams cards. Don and I originally connected because I kept saying every card he shows, like, yep, I want that card. Yep, I want that card. It's like, Don, stop, get out of my head, Don. He's got great cards.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but Don, it was on my channel. He was on the podcast a few episodes ago, and he's one of those newer guys to the community, like really new. Yeah. And I think his advice, we even talked about this, kind of in passing on the show, but like, he's like, oh my gosh, I never knew this existed. Like this kind of thing, that the hobby could be this way. And he's so grateful that he just decided, all right, I'm just going to dive in. And he's so grateful, and it's enriched his hobby experience. As again, I think you would hear over and over and over and over again for people. And if you just want to stay in your dark room and that's the way you enjoy it, that's fine. Like, I'm not telling people they have to do this or anything. It's just my experience would say it's a pretty good deal. Keep going. But I love Don too, of course.
A channel that's kind of new to me. Maybe it's been a few months. TJ Mack Vintage Cards.
Yes, his stuff's crazy.
Yeah, he does a great job. I like his videos because he tends to be like, okay, I'm going to talk about this specific set, and maybe it's the Hall of Famers from that set or whatever. And he talks about the year, he talks about the set itself, and he kind of shows them all off. So those are like fun videos to watch. And who else? I mean, there's so many. Dean Gerhardt. I want to throw in somebody that collects like raw vintage. I like the way, like, Dean's a set builder. And he collects raw, and it's fun because he'll be like, okay, I just went to a card show or a card shop, and here's what I got. And he's got a lot of different conditions that he's getting in terms of the cards, but it's really fun to watch him build the set. And he's building everything, so it's a lot of fun to watch his stuff.
Yeah. Well, as we finish up here, Alex, first, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, my pleasure. It was a lot of fun.
We definitely, I think you and I could really go off on some 50s stuff. We could have a really good time.
I can't believe this has been an hour. So yeah.
Like, what? The people that are listening are like, God, will you guys shut up? No.
Yes.
But tell people out there, if they're not familiar with you, if they're listening on the podcast, if they want to go explore YouTube a little bit, and where they can find you.
Sure. Well, my YouTube channel name is Bowman53.
No space.
No spaces. And it's primarily right now 50s cards and mail days. So yeah, not as many videos as I'd like to be making, but like you said before, life hits you sometimes. So I'm a little busy now, but still trying to keep up with the community, always trying to watch other people's videos and comment, because it's fun and it's a blast. It's like once you do it for a little while, you kind of get into it, and it becomes part of your routine. It's like, those are my buddies. I want to check in and see how they're doing. So
totally. Well, I would encourage everybody out there, if you don't watch Alex Bowman53. By the way, did you get your patch?
I did, and I have not ever shown it. So here it is.
Good.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Alex is a member of the YouTube Sports Card Hall of Fame, voted on by fellow YouTube sports card channels and watchers and collectors and all that kind of stuff. So congratulations making it this year, Alex. Well deserved.
Yeah, appreciate it.
But check out his channel. You will not be disappointed. And I would say start at the beginning. If you've never watched Alex before, watch his journey through the 53 Bowman color set, by the way, which is an important distinction. You should do the black and whites.
Yeah, maybe one of these days.
They don't look the same, do they? They just don't look the same. But
no.
Check out his channel. You won't be disappointed, I promise. And again, Alex, great having you. We got to get on, maybe talk some 55-ish, 54 Bowman versus Topps. Maybe do a little back and forth on that, because those were 2 great years. Obviously, 52, fantastic for Topps anyway. But see, we could just, I almost started going down that road. I almost did it just now. And I'm like, nope, stop. That's another episode. We'll get to
continued. Yeah.
Maybe we'll just stop this one and start recording that one right after this.
Maybe.
No. Well, thanks again, Alex. Yeah. And everybody out there, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. As always, appreciate the support. Thanks for making this 1 year of Golden Age of Cardboard a blast. I've really loved doing this. And we'll see you guys next week for the next episode. Take care and keep collecting.